I had a seventh grade English teacher, and I came to class and she said, okay, everyone take out a piece of paper and a pen and write something about peace. And for some reason I wrote a poem on Noah and his ark and his family, and we sent it off. It turned out it was a contest for the UN, and a few weeks later I came into class and Mrs. Freed said, "You've got a thick envelope." And she handed me the envelope and I had won. You know, it was kind of the first prize I won, and it kind of convinced me that I could maybe be a writer. And then when I was finishing my first film, Pi, I started to think about what would make a good next movie. And it was very early in my career, but I started to think about Noah. It took me, I guess, 14, 15 years of filmmaking to get to this point. So more than any film I've worked on, I think this one's been living with me since way back.
Darren Aronofsky's Noah is his blank check movie. Having just come off two celebrated Academy Award-winning movies in The Wrestler and Black Swan, he had finally got the much-coveted blank check every great director longs for. This was not Aronofsky's first shot at a blank check picture. Before Christopher Nolan, Aronofsky was in line to give Batman a dark and gritty reboot based on the Year One storyline. He almost made Watchmen, the RoboCop, Wolverine, and Superman reboots, along with many book adaptations along the way, but each time he had lost the gigs to much more conventional and audience-friendly directors. Aronofsky wanted to make an action-packed biblical epic for the modern times, and what he made was so challenging, it helped create a break between general and Christian audiences so great that it still lasts to this day.
Noah and the Christian rejection of art. 1. Aronofsky's Midrash.
A midrash is a form of storytelling within the Jewish faith that expounds on a foundational text in order to try to better understand the meaning of it as the storyteller sees it. Aronofsky is an environmentalist and a vegetarian, so he infuses the film with those themes. He is also known for taking his stories and themes to their most extreme logical conclusions.
The Noah story has, turned into this parable for kids. But it's not that story. When you actually look at what the text is, it is the first apocalypse story. Make us think about the second chance we've been given. We have the responsibility to creation was an idea that was very, very important.
It is about a God that we want to think is good and loves us, destroying every one but 8 people. I think that's just a hard thing for people to keep in their heads. And so it's much easier for them to think about, oh, here's a nice guy who saved the animals. What it's about is God kills everybody on the planet, essentially. And amongst those people that he killed that die in the flood, it doesn't say it explicitly, but if you start to think about it for a second, there's grandmas and grandpas and newborn infants. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of wicked people doing wicked things, but amongst that, there are all these other people, all of whom, except for Noah and his family, are killed. And that's a pretty broad judgment on humanity as a species.
Noah is Darren Aronofsky's midrash on the story of the Great Flood. Despite this being a retelling within the Jewish tradition of midrash, his story aimed to be a more mythic and universal adaptation.
But there's actually nothing in the film that contradicts the Bible. What we did is because it's only 4 chapters long, we were incredibly truthful to every single word that's in there and tried to breathe life into it and to bring it to life for 21st century audiences. You gotta remember, it's not just a biblical story, it's also this incredible mythical story that connects to every person on the planet.
Right.
So even if you do not have the Noah story in your tradition, you have a flood story in your tradition. In India, in China, in the Amazon, the Maya, everyone has this, these huge stories about water because it's this incredible chaotic force that destroys but also gives birth.
Aronofsky's Noah takes place 10 generations after Adam and Eve in the pre-Diluvian times, which means the time before the flood to us punk rockers. Aronofsky and his co-writer Ari Handel bring us into a fresh new world, literally.
If the Earth was at one point basically, molten, cooled off and things grew on it, Iceland has just cooled off. And in fact, some of it's not that cool. The ground is still warm in certain places. It's a volcanic place. And while it looks like it's the end of everything, it's also the beginning. It's actually what Earth probably looked a lot more like once. And this whole movie is about whether it's the end or the beginning.
Noah's story takes place over 4 chapters in both the Old Testament and the Torah. So in order to adapt the story for the big screen, they researched as much as they could about the era itself in order to fill out the world and the characters.
The Noah story in the Bible, Noah does not speak. It just says, and Noah did, as he was told, as God commanded him. Who is this character?
Well, we had to sort of look for clues to try and understand his character. It talks about Noah being a righteous man, and after doing a lot of research on what righteous means, we realized it was a balance between justice and mercy.
How come Noah didn't say, God, don't do it? There's good people. Because when God goes to Abraham and says, I'm going to destroy these cities, Abraham says, well, no, if I can find you 100 good guys, will you not destroy it? He pleads. Well, Abraham is representative of mercy. And Noah, well, he's more from a place of judgment because he follows God's will, but he doesn't try and save anyone. He just allows that judgment to take place.
And at the beginning of the story, it's very clear that the Creator wants justice, that he's very upset about the wickedness of man and how man has destroyed the planet. He wants to do something about it, and he's very just. In 4 stories from creation, through the original sin, through the first murder, and then to Noah, the Creator goes from creating the world to wanting to destroy it.
The movie begins with some quick exposition setting up the world. The main takeaways here are that it sets up the Guardians and that we are on an ancient Earth where all life is contained within one landmass. We then cut to a scene with young Noah and his father Lamech. Lamech is in the middle of performing a ritual. He wraps the skin of the snake that tempted Adam and Eve around his arm, and just as he is about to pass down the responsibility of taking care of the earth, he is interrupted by Tubal-Cain. Noah hides as he witnesses his father die senselessly in front of him. Tubal-Cain is the leader of the descendants of Cain and is resentful of the Creator for abandoning humanity.
He cursed us to struggle by the sweat of our brow to survive. Damned if I don't do everything it takes to do just that.
This allows him to steal, pillage, and rape the earth and all its people without guilt. Noah witnesses the cruelty of man and runs away. We then catch up to him as an adult. He is with his 2 sons, Shem, the oldest, and Ham, the middle brother. He carefully scrapes some dried moss off a rock. Ham, however, rips a stem off a flower to give to his mother, but is gently scolded by Noah. As they are walking away, Noah hears the sounds of what I could only call a wounded dogvark running from Cain's men. Echoing the scene just beforehand, he tells his sons to run and hide while he runs to aid the animal. Noah is then seen to either comfort the animal as it dies on its own or perform some sort of ritual to allow it to die painlessly. While Lamech may have been non-violent, his son is anything but, as he makes quick work of the men who were hunting the dogvark, who were simply looking for a bite to eat. Noah instantly kills 2 of them and gives the other one a compound fracture. Noah has in one sense enacted justice, as the dogvark himself was equally mortally wounded. And with this, the film's thesis is laid out in front of us. Man destroyed their own planet and are now living in desperation, which drives them to acts of violence out of necessity. Does that make them evil? Is Noah a good man? Is he a bad man because he is violent, or can violence be morally justified? The film explores these ideas as it goes on, but what is definitely not up for debate is that man is capable of cruelty, and Noah, despite his righteousness, is still just a man. They give the dogvark a funeral where Noah tells his children of man's evil nature.
Why did they kill it?
They eat them.
Why?
They think it makes them stronger.
Is it true?
They forget. Strength comes from the Creator.
Shem is put off by them, but Ham seems more intrigued. They come home where Nameh, Noah's wife, and their newborn son Japheth are waiting for them. He tells her that the men are closing in, which surprises Nameh, implying they are far removed from civilization. That night, Noah has his first vision. He walks on earth, soiled in blood. He sees the mountain that his grandfather Methuselah lives in, and just as he did at the beginning of the movie, he sees the flower instantly bloom from a raindrop. But then he is submerged in water, surrounded by dead bodies. The next day, he decides to take his family to Methuselah, and we are shown the wasteland man has left behind. Despite the film cementing itself 10 generations after Adam and Eve, what we see seems all too familiar to our modern world. As he travels through the wasteland, we eventually stumble upon a mine with very modern-looking machinery.
Well, there's a famous thing in Midrash, which is Jewish kind of discussion, that there's this idea that before the Noah story, God destroyed the world 900 times before it. And until he granted mercy and grace, he kept recreating the universe. And that idea was cool. What a great sci-fi kind of fantastical idea. Could we be part of that cycle was what was interesting. And so it allowed us to say, okay, these animals could be what's left of our animal kingdom down the road, and that could be remnants of our society.
They come across the dead bodies of a family who seem to just be camping out at the mine. Among the bodies, they come across Ela, a little girl who has been gravely wounded, yet is taken in by Noah and his family. As Nami is tending to Ela's wound, a group of men find and chase them down. They run until they have nowhere to go but this foreboding Mordor-looking place that men refuse to cross, and we quickly find out why.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
Noah is waken up by Name. They are in a canyon surrounded by the Watchers, who were betrayed by Cain's men in the past, and so contemplate killing Noah and his family. But once they learn that they are descendants of Seth, they decide to let them rot on their own instead. That night, Ela can't fall asleep, and so she asks Noah to sing her a song.
The moon is high, the trees entwine, your father waits for thee to wrap you in his sheltering wings and whisper you to sleep. Your father is the healing wind that whispers you to sleep, that whispers as you sleep.
Name tells Noah that Ela may not be able to bear children.
It's an ugly wound. She'll never have children.
They hear a loud noise. One of the Watchers has taken pity on them and decides to guide them to Methuselah. Along the way, we are given more exposition about the Watchers. We are given a bit of characterization for the Creator. The angels decided to share all they knew of creation with mankind, against the Creator's wishes. Then so they were punished by losing their angelic form, as symbolized by the disintegration of their wings upon impact, becoming stone in the process. The Creator has no mercy for those who disobey him. They make it to Methuselah's mountain. Noah takes Shem to meet his grandfather. Upon arriving, Methuselah wastes no time catching up with Shem.
What do you like most in the world?
Berries.
What?
Berries.
Ah, berries, yes. What can compete with fresh, ripe berries? Nothing. This has been so long I can barely remember the taste of them.
Before knocking them the fuck out. Noah and Methuselah have a brief conversation, but then Noah realizes that his tea has been spiked with shrooms and has a proper bad trip that expands on his earlier nightmarish vision. This time around, he is given more clarity. He tells his family what they must do.
Great flood is coming. The waters of the heavens will meet the waters of the earth. We build a vessel to survive the storm. We build an ark.
The next day, they are woken up by the sounds of Watchers dragging one of their own away. Noah rushes out and asks them for help, which angers the Watchers until... In one of the film's best scenes, we see the passage of time as doves fly over a growing river. Considering how long the people of this world live and how long it takes rivers to form, it is likely we witness centuries pass before we catch back up with the birds returning to an ark now nearing completion. We then see Ela and Shem be very horny on Maine. Ham, being the creep he is, watches from afar.
Shem! He doesn't have anyone.
They then witness the first group of animals as they make it to the ark. It seems the two birds had led the rest of the flying animals on their journey back. They show us how they put the birds to sleep.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
The next day, Ham asks Noah about having a girlfriend for himself. Noah tells him to be patient as the Creator brings them everything they need. And before Ham can press the issue, the lizards show up. But nothing could keep Ham from thinking about getting a girlfriend, not even this guy. Fortunately, He is killed by Tubal Cain, who returns older, still sporting the snakeskin he took from Lamech. He introduces himself to Ham as his king and gives him his weapon as a gift. Ham leads them to Noah, where Tubal Cain confronts him. They start by fighting over Ham.
Do not take my best soldier.
Ham, who has been told that men are cruel, was shown kindness and respect by the king of men. And here he is told by his father, who has only castigated and denied him what he wants.
All the birds are two. You have Mother, Shem, Azila. What of me? What of Japheth? Who is there for us?
Did you see how he made the forest to give us wood for the ark? How he sent the birds? So, hasn't he sent everything we need?
To drop the axe Tubal Cain gave him. The resentment is growing in Ham, as he is made to look weak in front of the king of men. Tubal Cain then lays claim to everything Noah has built, believing the creator has abandoned him. He repeats his exact words and actions from the opening of the film.
Cursed. To struggle by the sweat of our brow. Proud to survive. Damned
if I don't do everything it takes to do
just that. Damned if I don't take what I want.
And suddenly, Noah recognizes him, and his demeanor changes.
Return to your cities of Cain. No, we have all been judged.
I have men at my back, and you stand alone and defy me.
I'm not alone.
Fear my people!
Tubal Cain, looking much like I do at work, tells his people that they are going to take Noah's Ark, but are interrupted once the mammals show up. We see more of the world of men. It is violent and cruel. The sudden abundance of meat implies that at least a few of the animals who made it to the forest didn't make it to the ark. We have a rare moment of Noah simply being a kind and loving father to Elah, reassuring her of her worth despite her anxiety over being barren. This only does so much, however, as she tells him to find a wife for all his sons, even Shem, for whom she is very horny for, on Maine. That night, Noah goes to Tubal Cain's camp to find Ham and Japheth's partners. He witnesses not only the cruelty of man, but its hopelessness.
I have 2 girls to trade. Take the girls. Give me the meat. Give it to me.
Humanity is lost. They are fighting for scarce resources and devouring them without care. Their relentless consumption has destroyed their world and all that is in it, leaving it an uninhabitable wasteland, destined for doom and ruin. Also, the people in the movie are not doing great. Noah looks on in horror. He sees a man who is also played by Russell Crowe, literally seeing himself in the cruelty of others. He comes home the next day troubled. Ham asks about the women, but is told there will be none, and he takes it about as well as any teenage boy could.
You want me to stay a child? No! I'm asking you to be a man.
Even Nameh questions Noah on this and asks him to show their children mercy. At this point in the movie, I can't help but wonder when exactly he decided this fate for his children. Even in the beginning of the film, he seems to try to brush past the question about what happens after the flood.
To save the innocent.
The innocent?
The animals.
Why are they innocent? Because they still live as they did in the garden.
We need to save enough of them to start again.
But what of us?
I guess we get to start again too. We get to start again in a new, better world.
Throughout the movie, he seems more annoyed by Ham's desire for a woman than concerned about it. And considering how he has only ever seen humans as cruel, violent, and evil, it's easy to imagine he never intended for anything after the flood from the very beginning. The visions he receives from the Creator only deal with the flooding of the planet and the rescuing of the animals. While we see that many people will die, the Creator never explicitly tells him to let all humanity but him and his family perish, or to not help anybody else. It doesn't even touch on what to do after the flood at all, meaning that the Creator likely left all those details up for Noah's interpretation. Nameh takes it upon herself to speak to Methuselah, to ask if he could persuade Noah to reverse his decision about their children. but is instead met with support for Noah. And yet, her love and pleading for her children to have a future makes Methuselah have some doubts. Ham, tired of his father's weak abilities as a wingman, goes to Tubal-Cain's settlement to find his own girlfriend. He quickly falls into a ditch of dead bodies, where he meets a girl. He offers her food and keeps her company, as is tradition. Noah sends Shem to find his brother while Elah stumbles across Methuselah as he looks for berries. He then blesses Elah and her barren womb with life. This makes her the most horny. She finds Shem and they waste no time. That evening, the rains begin to fall. Tubal-Cain decides to strike, seeing himself as a god in the creator's absence. In the face of annihilation, he commands his men to seize the ark. Shem and Elah make it back to Noah, but Ham is nowhere to be found, making Noah have to go find him himself. Meanwhile, Ham rushes with his new girlfriend back to the ark, but her leg gets caught in a bear trap. Ham tries to liberate her but fails, and just as all hope is lost, Noah arrives. Ham begs his father to help. Before he can act, he sees a giant mob closing in and runs, leaving her behind. They fight to get back to the ark. The Guardians line up and guard the ark against the human race. They hold out against Tubal-Cain's soldiers long enough to let Noah and Ham through, but not long after they start to fall themselves. As the first Guardian faces death, he begs forgiveness of the Creator.
My Creator, forgive me.
And here, we have another great use of ambiguity. On the one hand, this could simply be interpreted as the Creator forgiving the Guardians for their initial disobedience, which would make this the first time the Creator shows mercy and forgiveness, which could foreshadow the end of the story. On the other, since the Creator only accepts them back once they have all died in battle against men, it could be said they are rewarding the Guardians for helping Noah wipe humanity out. Tubal-Cain finds a way to sneak inside the ark while Noah fights off stragglers until the floodwaters raise the ark. The last Guardian decides to sacrifice himself, taking out a bunch of people and allowing us the sight of the entire planet covered in storm clouds. The final act of the apocalypse comes just as water erupts from the ground, drowning out many of the people coming for the ark. We are given a brief moment of peace with Methuselah as he finally finds a berry to eat, this being the last peaceful moment of the old world as the floodwaters wash him away and all of humanity with it. Despite the dark and serious tone of the film and a few creative liberties, the story so far has more or less been the story we all know. Most tellings of Noah tend to skip over what happens in the boat between the beginning of the flood and when they land, but this is where the film's themes come to the surface. While the first half of the movie has been this grand biblical epic with CGI creatures and set pieces, the second half contracts into a tense family drama. It begins with the sound of innocent people crying for help. In an attempt to lighten the mood and maybe explain himself, Noah tells them the story of creation. Aronofsky and Ari Handel do something very clever here. The story of creation is still the one that is told in the Bible and the Torah, only this time it incorporates the Big Bang. The marrying of science and faith is one of the film's finer moments and boldest choices. It is interesting that this scene is a reinvention of the Judeo-Christian creation myth, and it happens just as the film reinvents itself, with the first half being about Noah judging all of humanity, and the second about what is left of humanity judging Noah. He informs them of the full extent of his mission. He believes God has judged man so evil it has no place in the future. More than anybody else, Ham takes this the hardest. He brings food back to Tubal-Cain, who he saw sneak onto the ark as the world was flooding. Tubal-Cain recognizes the anger in Ham. He likely saw it when they first met. Ham for a moment denies this, but it is obvious. Nameh sees her husband has been struggling with all he has had to do. In a brief moment of respite, she allows him to let his guard down for the first time since he came back from Tubal-Cain's camp. We cut back to Ham and Tubal-Cain. Ham is shocked that he could carelessly eat another animal, but Tubal-Cain points out the absurdity that he is judging him for eating animals while his father lets innocent babies die. The film is presenting us an interesting contrast. We can't help but feel appalled by Noah and his seemingly heartless nature, because we have to hear the cries of innocent people too, as it is constantly in the background of the mix throughout this part of the film. On the other hand, We have Tubal Cain, who we know will let humanity become violent and savage under his reign. However, his charisma and skills as a leader make us believe in him simply because he tells us what we want to hear, just as he tells Ham what he wants to hear. Noah treated Ham as a child. Tubal Cain called him his greatest soldier. We root for Tubal Cain, even though he is wrong, because his morality is simple. But Noah, who we know is acting according to the Creator's will, is an increasingly unlikable and complicated character, even though he is doing the right thing because he challenges us. How many times have we let evil, charismatic leaders destroy our nations and planet? How many times have we ignored the warnings of experts and scientists because they are too frightening to consider? If you are rooting for Tubal Cain, you're part of the problem. But what kind of monster would root for Noah? Aronofsky and Handel masterfully made the audience the bad guys, but appealing to our deepest human instincts. Ela wakes up sick. She takes her pre-Diluvian pregnancy test and finds out that she's carrying Shem's baby. Nameh and her share a brief moment of elation before the implications of her being pregnant begin to settle in. Upon learning of Ela's pregnancy, Noah is angry, as it essentially renders the whole point of what he has done meaningless. Noah deciding to end his bloodline is harsh, yes, but it is fair. It shows no favoritism. It renders all of humanity equally guilty, including himself and the people he loves. And to go against that truly does waste all of those innocent lives. Noah is desperate for a sign that he can let his grandchildren live. He shouts at the heavens, looking like he is losing his mind. This moment is borderline absurd with how dark it is. There is no rousing speech. There is no charisma. There is only a desperate man pushed to his edge, begging to be pulled back. But it is not until Noah commits to seeing his mission to the end that the Creator sends him a sign. If we were not on Tubal Cain's side before, we are now. Despite the desperation, the emotional exhaustion, the inner conflict, the guilt, despite knowing Noah is only acting on the Creator's behalf, despite following Noah as our protagonist and seeing why he became the way he is, and despite knowing what life under Tubal Cain looks like, the thought of a man killing his own grandchildren is too much for any emotionally well-adjusted person, including his own family. Noah has now completely alienated himself from everyone around him. His family begins sending out birds, hoping they come back with some sign of land nearby. They have built Shem and Ela a raft, ready to go once the birds bring something back. But the clock is ticking, as Ela is very far along. She decides it's better to risk it on the open sea than to wait and see Noah fulfill his duties. Nameh pleads with Noah to punish her for making all this happen, but he won't budge. So Nameh says what we're all thinking.
I forgave you. When everyone was dead, I forgave you. I was ready to die with you. But this, I will never forgive. Boy or girl, I will never forgive. And you will die alone, not just alone, but hated. Hated by everyone you love. That is just. That is just.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
The film has worked us up to root against Noah just in time for Tubal Cain to have fully healed. He pulls a right-wing grifter move and questions Ham's manhood in order to get him to do something evil, help him kill his own father. Noah continues to show us the full extent of his determination, as not only does he burn Ela and Shem's raft down before they can leave, but he even gives them a mustache-twirling villain line.
I thought you were good. So that's why I chose you.
He chose me because he knew I would complete the task.
Nothing more, son.
Just then, Ela's water breaks, as if the world wasn't flooded enough. Noah waits outside as Nameh helps Ela deliver her baby. Shem lets Noah know he will defend his family if he has to, yet Noah remains committed. Ham comes in and lures his father away. Noah walks into their trap. Tubal Cain lunges at Noah as Ham gets the rear. They fight as Ela delivers her baby, but in typical Aronofsky fashion, he twists the knife on us by having her give birth to twins, both of them girls.
If your child is a boy, we'll replace Japheth. Last man. If it is a girl, who could mature into a mother, she must die.
Shem decides to join in on the patricide to confront Noah, but then the ark finally makes landfall, violently. Tubal Cain is pinned against a rock. But before he can finish him off, Shem attacks Noah. But before Shem can finish Noah off, Tubal Cain knocks Shem out.
You got knocked the fuck out!
But before Tubal Cain can finish Noah off, Ham stabs him in the armpit. But instead of being angry, like the charismatic bastard he is, Tubal Cain love bombs Ham one last time.
Now, you are a man.
Returning a family heirloom in the process. Noah takes advantage of the situation and goes to finish his job of killing his grandkids, but not before Ham has the last word.
Her name was Niall. She was innocent. She was good.
Noah finds Elah and her children. He grants them the mercy of dying in peace as Elah requests. She sings the song Noah sang to her the night they took her in.
The moon is white, the leaves entwine.
Your father waits for thee
to ride in his shouts and things,
and whisper you to sleep.
Your father is the healing wind that whispers you to sleep.
That whispers as
you sleep.
Noah is suddenly reminded of his last act of mercy. For a moment, he contemplates going through with it, but in the end, he refuses and blesses them instead. Elah was the last person that Noah showed mercy to. He thought she was going to be a burden, but grew to love her as he did his own children. Here he is again, his granddaughters being seen as burdens, but Elah's song reminds him of all that Elah brought him, and so extends that mercy onto her children. Yet this is not met with joy, as Noah has failed the Creator in his eyes. One of the doves returns, bringing a twig. Land is nearby. We see Noah drunk on wine. He has become a recluse. His guilt and shame over letting all those people die for nothing and failing in his mission proving to be far too great for him to handle. The ark is broken open. The animals roam free. And Ham is not doing much better than Noah. He too feels alienated from his family. Clearly, Tubal Cain's words have had an effect on him. He comes across his father naked and passed out. And while his brothers rush to cover him up and embrace him, Ham throws the family heirloom back to Noah with spite and storms off. He says goodbye to Elah before he leaves his family towards an empty world.
You know, the first thing that happens after the story is Ham goes off and, Babel happens. So man's wickedness shows up once again. So the idea of why destroy the world when wickedness is still inside us, and why allow us to survive became this kind of central theme.
Ham has a complicated moral code compared to the rest of his family. He is the descendant of Seth, but he is easily persuaded by Tubal Cain to the ways of man, torn apart by the desire to do good and the desire to be human. Elah and Noah have a talk. She tells him that he was trusted to make these hard choices, and one of them was to show love and mercy. We see clips of the modern animal kingdom, of the world Noah's love and mercy leads to. Noah rejoins his family, and with the skin of the snake that tempted Adam and Eve, he performs the ritual Lamech was unable to finish with Noah and passes the duties of taking care of the world to his grandchildren. Elah and Shem have only been shown as loving to each other, and so their children will only know love and mercy. And with that as the new basis for humanity, maybe things will be okay. The Creator shows their approval of this by creating the first rainbows and the promise to never go this ham again. Get it? Ham? The film ends as the sun sets on golden hour. I'm not here to tell you this is a great movie or that it's some forgotten hidden gem, but you cannot deny the sheer amount of artistry on display. The film takes its source material seriously and treats it with great respect. The characters are all well realized and acted. The movie looks and sounds amazing, with every penny of its budget on screen. It shows great imagination and creativity with how it portrays the pre-Diluvian world. By all measures, this film is a complete piece of art, where every character and theme is fully realized and explored in unique and refreshing ways. Despite what many people believe, Noah was a moderate success. It didn't set the world on fire, but it made a healthy profit. As is typical of Aronofsky's films, the audience and critics were divided on it. While it mostly garnered mixed to positive reviews, there are a few bunch of people who hated this movie before it even came out.
2. The Trials and Tribulations of Noah.
While the production of Noah was relatively uneventful, the post-production was a more difficult process. In typical studio fashion, they greenlit Handel and Aronofsky's wild and creatively risky script and were confused when Aronofsky, a guy who has exclusively directed dark, intense, and weird dramas, produced a wild, dark, intense, weird, and creatively risky movie.
It's all about precision. You lose precision on big films.
What
That's
do you
the thing that happens. Because it's so expensive, the day rate, you don't have enough time. So that's the big loss, is you can't be as precise. But I think, this is the theory I have, the studios actually like it. Because the less the precise film, the more mainstream of just a master and coverage, they're happy because it's just very basic storytelling.
So by precise, you mean like big, complicated shots that you do 20 times?
Yeah. Hard, difficult shots that, no, you're compromised. You want to make focus as easy as possible. You want to make the move as easy as possible. You want to make that. So, and save the big shots for the ILM budget when they don't actually do anything on set. but the on-set time is so limited.
Right.
Even Aronofsky understood that he was out of his element. In a profile in The New Yorker, he expresses his concerns over a biblical epic with this budget, quote, written by two not very religious Jewish guys, acknowledging that his idea may be too existential for either general or Christian audiences. Paramount hoped Noah to be their Passion of the Christ. Rob Moore, vice chairman of Paramount at the time and a devout Christian himself, reassured Aronofsky, saying they would, quote, position the film using the pedigree of the cast, the visual effects, and the action. Aronofsky screened a 2-hour and 46-minute rough cut of Noah. The studio was worried about the dark intensity of the film, specifically the scene where Noah leaves Niall, Ham's would-be wife, to die. The film was written, shot, and acted in a way that Noah's decision was swift and self-assured, but the studio wanted more inner conflict to soften his character. Aronofsky didn't get to secure a final cut on the movie. Arnon Milchan, producer and president of New Regency Films, said, quote, it wasn't the studio against Darren. Nobody took the movie away from him. But when you're spending $250 million, including marketing costs, you have to think about marketing to a wide audience. And because Darren closed himself and said, I'm not going to do anything other than my vision, Paramount had to try stuff in a heavy-handed manner. In December 2013, the studio would screen their 5th cut of Noah. Hoping to pander to the Christian audience, they cut the film down to 86 minutes, began with a montage of random religious imagery, skipped the middle part, any of the conflict between the family, and ended on a Christian rock song.
My God's not dead, he's surely alive.
Fortunately, neither this cut or any of the 4 other versions of the film tested as strongly as Aronofsky's cut. In the end, Aronofsky won the war for creative control, and the movie we see today is Aronofsky's director's cut. Even the animated intro at the beginning, which totally feels like a studio note, was actually an idea of Aronofsky's after showing the film to David Fincher, who suggested he quickly establish that the men of Cain are bad and the descendants of Seth are good, so that the film was a lot more accessible, something that Paramount applauded. Aronofsky told The New Yorker, quote, the process sucked. I don't know if you can find another over $100 million movie that didn't have reshoots. And at this point, Paramount 98% supports everything I want in the movie. So I live and die by this version and take full responsibility. Paramount knew from the test screenings that the Christian audience would reject the film. They began including a disclaimer that read, the film is inspired by the story of Noah. While artistic license has been taken, we believe that this film is true to the essence, values, and integrity of a story that is a cornerstone of faith for millions of people worldwide. The biblical story of Noah can be found in the book of Genesis and all the marketing material. This didn't stop the studio from trying to get the religious audience in, leading to a seemingly awkward and embarrassing moment where Russell Crowe and Darren Aronofsky were denied a private screening with Pope Francis, leading them to sitcom-level stunts where they got tickets to a free public appearance hoping to get his blessing. The Pope did not give his blessing. Despite the difficulty of bringing this movie to fruition, on March 24th, 2014, Noah was released to theaters.
Now, I would liken this movie to Titanic, not necessarily in plot and the way it's made, but the fact that it is a movie you go into it and you have an idea of what's going to go down. There's going to be some rain, there's going to be a flood, people are going to die, and more than likely, Noah's going to win. But it's the different things that Aronofsky did along the way that made this a very enjoyable movie to watch.
Darren Aronofsky, one of the things he said was, look, you know, people talk about it being literal. How can you be literal? I mean, the story is mythical, it's mystical, and he was implying right from the outset that the idea of doing a literal version of this story is completely mad. Of course, also assuming that the story he's doing is taking as its source, you know, the Old Testament, which is only sort of 4 paragraphs. I mean, he's clearly looking, there's Gnostic text, there's Kabbalah in there's stuff from East and West. Again, he kept talking about this idea of there is a myth which involves water, which, you know, goes through all different cultures and turns up in many, many different ways. And he and Ari Handel have thrown the net very, very wide.
But the story from the Bible's pretty cut and dry. It's like Noah and his family, they were good, and then they built an ark and a flood happened and bad guys got wiped out happily ever after. But this isn't really like that. Definite license has been taken for this story per what the Bible story is, and that's pissed a lot of people off. But this is my rule of thumb. If there's a movie that is a story from the Bible and it's pissed off religious people, no disrespect to religious people, I'm saying that probably means the story is a little more interesting than you thought it was going to be. I thought the added context and the added things, I thought that was really good. Holy shit, Noah has these rock soldiers from Dimension X? What? Those things were awesome though, these big rock dudes all just helping him build a boat.
That is not a story, that's not an interpretation that comes up through Genesis, but there are rabbinical teachings that talk about, at one point Noah thought that's what God wanted, is that once the flood hits, we all need to die out too. So that's not something that
wasn't
the
made
writers
up out of,
wasn't made up. Now there's a lot of stuff in this movie that
made
is
up
made
then,
up,
but it wasn't
right.
made up now.
But there's a lot of there's more, I think, that comes out of a tradition than I think a lot of people are going to realize, because I think a lot of people are going to go into this only knowing the Genesis story, which is pretty short. You know, just kind of a few paragraphs. Like,
now there is an aspect of this movie that I know will anger people, largely people who are religious purists. This is very much so an adaptation of things that are in the Bible, and he definitely twists a lot of it in creative ways. And if that angers you as a person, then this is not a movie you're going to want to watch, because you'll watch this movie and be like, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. What's that all about? I don't understand that.
So, time and again, it would not just deviate a little bit from the biblical account, but it almost seemed like they went out of their way to make it as unbiblical as possible.
I actually read up on the new movie. You know, I already knew. Somebody asked me about it before I read up on it. Are you gonna go see that? I'm like, well, you know, I haven't gone to the movie theater in like 12 or 13 years. You know, I'm not going to go to see this, because everything that Hollywood puts out is garbage. You know, it's all there to brainwash you according to their agenda.
He plants a seed and an entire forest grows in the desert while he's standing there. And then he looks into the tent and he's like, kids, here's the wood for the ark. Really, Mr. Noah, that's what you would say? Really? You wouldn't even go, behold the awesome power of God. You wouldn't go, whoa, that was weird. You're like, kids, get up. We got some wood to cut. Really?
The characters in the story don't really have the same relationship as people do now with what God is, and we wanted to make a clear distinction because, you know, we're 10 generations from the creation.
There's this really underwriting satanic Gnostic theme in the Noah movie that many people aren't aware of. In fact, you'll see things in this expose that you will not have seen in the last one, or I think in any expose. Gnosticism was the greatest threat to the early church, and after having seen the Noah movie, finally, it went way beyond what I even expected. And when you know what's going on with Satanism and Gnosticism, and you see that movie and you have an understanding, you understand how diabolical it really is.
If they're coming out with a Bible movie, it has a satanic purpose.
Darren Aronofsky's Noah is a Luciferian tale that portrays God as an evil demiurge and his emissary on Earth, the title character Noah, as a bloodthirsty madman who wants to murder his own family in order to rid the Earth of all humans.
Noah director Darren Aronofsky seems to promote Antichrist Gnostic elements in his other movies and approaches the Noah story as a great fable. Aronofsky admitted, quote, I don't think it's a very religious story. I think it's a great fable. That's part of many different religions and spiritual practices, end quote. Regarding reports like 98% of Christians would not see the Noah movie if it was not truly biblically based, Aronofsky arrogantly responded, quote, I don't give an F about the test scores. My films are outside the scores, end quote. Now, some Christians are discerning. They know to expect a God-fearing movie from Hollywood, or to expect a godly movie from the godless atheist, the professed atheist, Darren Aronofsky, the director, is like expecting a accurate history of the Jews if it was written by Adolf Hitler and his propaganda minister of the Third Reich, Joseph Goebbels.
That's why I don't believe that you should watch TV, you shouldn't go to movies, because it's just all programming of this world and of Satan.
Aronofsky's portrayal of God as evil or unmerciful in the movie Noah should not shock us. Part of the agenda in many in Hollywood is to manufacture atheists and Satanists and turn the masses against the one true God, our Creator. In our eye-popping video, Hollywood's War on God, we document the Gnostic satanic themes of inverting God and Satan in many of Hollywood's most popular movies. Because this movie is an outrageous blasphemy and a mockery of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's a monstrosity when you look at what the Bible says and who our God is and what this movie says and what it says about biblical history.
So basically, Noah is just kind of a necessary evil just to save the animals. It's all about saving the animals. Whereas in the Bible is really clear that God had Noah build the ark to save mankind. And the animals were so that we could have something to eat when we get off the ark. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's what they're even there for, is to be used and to be eaten, okay?
In fact, Aronofsky states that death is really, in the movie, it's a move from darkness to light. Isn't that interesting? Because that's how he portrays death in the Noah movie. In fact, we know in Scripture that Satan and his fallen angels are damned for eternity. They're going to the lake of fire. The Scripture is very clear on that subject. However, in the movie Noah, when these fallen angels are destroyed by the flood, guess what? This light escapes, their physical bodies that God had punished them with, and guess what? They're set free. Before I'd seen the movie, before I'd looked at the script, I was telling people, I believe it's going to be Gnostic. I believe he's going to make Noah look evil, he's going to make God look evil, and sure enough, that's exactly what he did. They don't go to hell. They don't go to the lake of fire. They're actually set free, and you see their spirits going up into the heavens. He's going to make God look evil. In fact, one of them just says, forgive me, and wow, that's enough, And, Satan has fallen angels can be forgiven. In fact, it's interesting, too, one of them even commits suicide, and it sets his spirit free.
Movie, it's all about just saving the animals. So Noah feels that God wants him to murder everyone on the ark and kill himself. So from what I understand, this Noah movie is like a horror movie, in a sense, where, Noah's going around, he's going to kill. I haven't gone to the movie theater in like 12 or 13 years. I'm not going to go to see this. Because human bad, animal good. Now, does that fit the world's agenda? Does that fit Satan's eugenics agenda? Does that fit the agenda that's inscribed on the Georgia Guidestones? That says, we need to eliminate 90% of the population and bring it down to 500 million? Does that fit the agenda of Bill Gates and these other globalists? Does that fit the agenda of who was the Prince of England, Prince Philip or whatever, who said, I want to be reincarnated as a virus to kill off 90% of mankind? I'm not going to go to see this.
Hey everyone, Editing Ed here. Just wanted to take a minute to clarify something here. When I say Christians throughout the essay, both before and after this and all that, I'm specifically talking about extremist fundamentalist Christians. So if you are not an extremist fundamentalist Christian and I say Christians, I'm not talking about you. I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. So let's get back to the essay. Noah is art, not only in its aesthetics, but in its intentions, in its perspective, and in its vision. The film is divisive. Even among secular audiences, it is still largely split in its reception. However, secular audiences felt no sense of ownership over the story of Noah, and so most moved on and forgot about the film. Yet despite the fact that every culture and religion has its own flood myth, and despite the fact that the Torah is just the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Christians decided that the story belonged to them. Aronofsky's sincerity did not matter to them, as they held his atheism against them. His artistic choices were insults against their faith. His perspective did not matter to them, as it was not their own. To the Christian audience, Noah represented yet another in a long line of big-budget studio movies based on biblical stories that failed to connect with them. More evidence that Hollywood simply didn't understand them. They were right, of course. What the studios didn't understand about the Christian audience at the time is that they were not interested in art. They didn't want to be challenged. They didn't even want to be moved emotionally. They just wanted to be preached to. and preach they did.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
3. Gods, not art.
Tonight, more than 200 years after a former colony won the right to determine its own destiny,
The early 2010s were the beginnings of America's social and political division. The election and re-election of Barack Obama represented a shift in culture and of power. For the first time, a white person wasn't president, and white people were no longer the center of cultural or political discourse. Concepts like white privilege, patriarchy, inclusivity, and equality were in the zeitgeist, and the then nascent social media apps like Twitter and Facebook were facilitating increasingly extreme and divisive debates among strangers. America was slowly but surely dividing itself along political lines, and fundamentalist Christians firmly sided with conservatives and libertarians. This alienated centrist or left-leaning people still left in the church, as suddenly it was the Christian position that poor people shouldn't have access to health care if they can't afford it. While fundamentalist Christians were losing power among their own members, they were slowly losing ground in one of the largest movements of the time, the fight for marriage equality. The steady adoption of marriage equality bills among several states in the U.S. allowed formerly closeted people to live openly and freely as their true selves. And as more people got to know their openly gay neighbors, students, co-workers, and superiors, the more they saw them as human beings and their rights as self-evident. The fundamentalist community had painted themselves as villains and out of touch. They couldn't consume secular media without seeing some form of gay representation, and so they slowly began to reject secular media altogether. PureFlix was founded in 2005 by David A.R. White and others, including country singer Randy Travis. For the first 9 years, they primarily made direct-to-DVD movies catered to the Christian audience. Slowly, their movies grew in audience size and budget. As they grew, they were able to attract star power like Lance Henriksen and Sean Astin. In October 2012, production began on God's Not Dead, primarily in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. With a relatively large budget of $2 million and the star power of TV legends like Dean Cain, Kevin Sorbo,
and Sir William Duck of Duck Dynasty.
It was PureFlix's largest gamble to date. Based on an email you got from your grandma, the story centers around Josh Wheaton, a devout Christian, and his strawman maniac of an atheist professor, Jeff, played by Kevin Sorbo. The film is inspired by an event that totally happened. In some university that somehow operates on a different legal system than the rest of the country, a philosophy professor forces all his students to denounce their religious belief or be kicked from the class. As academics tend to do, the professor pulls a debate me bro on an 18-year-old student who accepts the challenge. This isn't enough to fill a feature-length runtime, of course, so there are also all these other characters. Their stories all cross, and they all wind up at the same concert at the end, but neither of these stories reinforce or explore any theme other than that the Christian God is the right God, and everyone should worship him. The film is a dull slog, where a series of scenes play back-to-back with no rhythm or flow. Actors try their best to wring out any emotion from the flat script, but even our main characters are so one-dimensional, all either actor could do is passionately raise their voices to express any emotion. It's directed with all the imagination of a cement block. As an atheist, I believe Christians deserve good movies. Movies that challenge and inspire, that entertain, that give you complicated but relatable characters to identify with as they fail and succeed and grow through a well-told story. Movies that look good, that have a good pace and good music. But instead, these studios make these lazy, preachy, boring, immature, and simplistic excuses for cinema that do nothing but provide their audience something to stare at and agree with, while feeling like they're contributing to something that will stick it to Hollywood if it makes enough profit. And the audience loved it! The film went on to make $64 million at the box office. God's Not Dead not only affirmed the beliefs of fundamentalist Christians, but rallied them to spread their beliefs via the social media marketing campaign explained at the end of the film.
Have you got your cell phones on you? Good. All right, now while this next song is playing, I want everyone to go to their contacts and click on everybody you know and text them. 3 simple words. God's not dead.
Throughout most of its lifetime, PureFlix, now Pinnacle Peak Pictures, as if that isn't hella redundant, was a small but respectable Christian independent film studio. They would try their hands at everything from dramas to comedies to romantic comedies and other genres. But once God's Not Dead released and became a surprise hit, the studio took a turn. They had found a new rabid audience. Pureflix narrowed its focus as a studio, but their flagship series is God's Not Dead, now having had 3 sequels, each making less money than the last. Yet despite that, the studio keeps coming back to the series. While the first movie centered around a clash of secular academic culture with fundamentalist Christian culture, the following films became increasingly political and ridiculous. The second one is about free speech and escalates the conflict from teacher versus student to teacher versus the justice system, this time with the teacher being the protagonist. The third one revolves around the seizing of a church by a college, citing zoning laws and eminent domain, eventually leading to a student burning it down and one of the main characters dying. The fourth one is when the series gets its most outright political and the most petty. God's Not Dead, We the People is dense with propaganda. The movie starts and ends with a speech by Ronald Reagan and unironically equates the fight for homeschooling with the plight of slaves. The film wastes no time in showing the potential horrors of homeschooling by introducing Satan in the form of an aromantic social worker. She is there to inspect the homeschool curriculum to make sure the kids are getting an adequate education. This seemed like such an obviously good idea, I didn't question it, but apparently this is a totally made up event. There are no homeschool inspectors in government, but when you see the setup here, you will wish there were. Our protagonist, Rebecca, is not simply schooling her kids, she is running a literal, unaccredited homeschool. The characters make it very clear they are teaching a primarily Bible-based curriculum, scoffing at the idea of teaching math or science. The only thing more horrifying than all of this is that the fundamentalist Christian community are fully in support of it. This film represents the idea of an unaccredited literal homeschool as a good, sensible Christian thing. This sets up the central conflict of the film. After being forced to send their kids to public school by Judge Janine Pirro from Fox News, they are invited by a congressman to testify in front of a subcommittee on homeschooling that is calling for their standards to be in line with public education standards. The film, of course, presents this as a bad thing, but it also is written to such a specific audience that to everyone outside of it, the film actually makes a solid case for ensuring homeschooling is more in line with public education and for the creation of some agency that inspects homeschools to ensure adequate conditions in education. The best case against the film's pro-unregulated homeschool message is the character of Taylor Hayes and her poor son Jackson. Taylor is a recently widowed mom. The film saves this for the end as a big reveal, but honestly, this character is so terrible, both in her conception and execution, I'll just reveal her absurd backstory now. Taylor Hayes was married to an Air Force pilot. The film insinuates that his death was either a suicide or part of some nefarious cover-up. This film is very much treading into waters of conspiracy theory. Taylor, get this, also used to work at NASA. This is revealed in order to counteract the argument that homeschool parents are ignorant nutjobs, but the film's best move was to make Taylor an ignorant nutjob herself. Following the death of her husband, she leaves her job at NASA to spend more time with her son. Taylor has an incredibly highly skilled job that demands a high pay, and the amount of schooling she had to attain along the way would also qualify her for a myriad of other jobs that maybe won't pay as much as her job at NASA, but will allow her more time with her son while maintaining a survivable income. Someone in her position has a near limitless range of options for work. So what does she do given all this? She takes a job as a waitress. The worst part is that she is shown from the very beginning to be struggling to get by and have enough time to spend with her son Jackson. The film also makes it very clear that Jackson is not doing well. He is closed off to everyone but the daughter of the main character. He acts out. The poor kid is in desperate need of help, and that is a completely normal thing for him to go through. It's also completely normal for Taylor to feel overwhelmed. She is not a bad mother for not being able to be 100% in this situation, but it is beyond bizarre that Taylor decides to leave her kid behind to join the other characters on their trip to Washington, D.C. The movie never hides away from the fact that the committee was going to pass the regulations whether they were there or not, and that the hearing was just a formality. Look, grief is different for everyone. I wouldn't criticize anyone for dealing with the death of their partner irrationally, but the film uses her and her backstory so cynically, I have to call this depiction for what it is: emotionally manipulative bullshit. Towards the end of the film, the father of the token Muslim girl of the series has a crisis of faith and goes to a Christian church. The way the film presents this scene, you'd think he's about to have a boxing match with Christ himself, but the writers showed some restraint. And yet, another scene that unintentionally makes Christians look incapable of caring for children, Jackson, who is left unattended, walks up to this adult man unsupervised in a church. The father is never shown to be a creep or anything, but this is an objectively alarming situation. However, that pales in comparison to this scene. And by the way, I paid to rent this on YouTube. I am not going to pay more money to get this on DVD, so I just shot this on my phone. So if it looks and sounds like crap, you'll know why.
Jackson wouldn't last 10 minutes in a public school. They'd classify him as special education and label him emotionally disturbed. They'd give him an individual education plan which might not even challenge him at all until eventually Jackson becomes the label the state pins on him, and why his father died, I feel like would all be for nothing. Why? Defending our freedoms.
Okay, so I just had to step in here because this scene is absolute madness and a little sad, kind of depressing, you know, because these God's Not Dead movies, they're a reflection of how fundamentalist Christianity views the secular world. And what this scene alone tells us is absolutely like messed up, just absolutely messed up, you know? Taylor admits that if Jackson were in a regular public school, he would be considered emotionally disturbed. She also knows that she doesn't have time to help him out. And she sends her kid to a homeschool where there are no qualified professionals that will help him process his grief or give him support that she can't because she's too busy working her dumb waitress job. And look, there's nothing wrong with being a waitress, but when you work for NASA and you become a waitress, that's a choice. That's not a matter of circumstance. That not only is Taylor unable to give Jackson the emotional support that he needs, but regardless of what she is saying here, Jackson is not okay even while he's at homeschool. He's not doing well, period. You can't work at a school as a or in general without at least passing a background check and also having all the right psychological, educational qualifications to be able to actually be a service and a help and support for kids. You don't get that in the homeschool. All you get is whatever the parents deem acceptable to teach. The equating of having special needs with having your rights taken away is even like more bizarre, because to some extent the movie is acknowledging that being neurodivergent has a lot of negative social consequences, that it's harder out there for neurodivergent people. And yet the only discussion that this issue has within this movie is in this one moment where they're essentially just saying, like, if you're special needs, you're a second-class citizen. It offers no solutions for that whatsoever. Meanwhile, at the end of the movie, there's an anti-vaxxer who gets to actually speak for themselves briefly, because I think God's Not Dead, even they understand they're pushing a little bit with the anti-vax shit, but they at least get to speak for themselves. The neurodivergent issue is basically used the same way the fact that one of the characters is Muslim is used. It's sort of like this coded metaphor for something bigger. And I think for this, it's equating neurodivergence with some sort of leftist secular issue when it's just fact. Taylor denying her child the emotional and developmental help that he needs isn't making him any less like needful of those things. He's not any less neurodivergent because the parent is ignoring the problem. Like it's an absolutely bonkers take for this movie to have. The movie paints in such a bold, secular, bad, religion, good sort of light, when the reality of the fact is that a lot of these people, their kids, are being groomed or God knows what else by the very people they trust at church. And the reason why they trust at church is because of shit like this mentality that paints any secular thing as inherently evil and any religious thing as inherently good. That's how you ensure terrible fucking things happen. And that seems to be, to me, as an atheist and as a secular observer, the biggest flaw of how Christian fundamentalism works. It's like they want fucked up shit to happen because they lay all the conditions for it to happen so bare and so strongly that it's damn near inevitable. And that's what these movies are defending. Back to the essay. Sadly, fundamentalist Christians are not interested in what the secular world has to offer, good or bad. This film supports and enforces the idea that isolation is the best strategy for dealing with it, something we see play out in modern society. I was Catholic growing up. I was the #1 student in my Sunday school even. But as I got older and got into bad religion, I started to question my faith. I became an atheist at 14 and never looked back. I lived in a small town with a church on every corner, so if I were to have a social life at all, I was going to have to go to youth groups and Bible studies. And I did. Many of the kids and some adults knew I was an atheist, but I've always been respectful of people's religions and never acted out. Hell, I often sang along to the songs and all that just for the fun of it. This is because before Trump turned the right to a bunch of deranged conspiracy theorists and before Obama shifted the cultural balance of power, Christians were mostly cool people who may not always have agreed with what their kids learned at school or in college, but still wanted them to get a decent education because they intended their kids to be functional members of society. Because back then, Christians saw themselves as members of society. Don't get me wrong, there have always been fundamentalist extremists in every religion, and even though I believe most Christians are rational, good people, there is no denying that the fundamentalist extremists are at least louder than ever, if not any larger. On September 29th, 2008, weeks away from the election of Barack Obama, who had by then had his birth certificate and religious beliefs questioned by the right, TLC debuted 19 Kids and Counting. Obama was far ahead in the polls. Conservatives are losing public favor after the failed war in Iraq and the Great Recession. Fundamentalists were losing public favor due to their protests of gay marriage. There wasn't much positive Christian representation going on in secular media. So when the Duggars, a seemingly perfect, unapologetically fundamentalist Christian family, showed up on their TV, they felt seen. The Duggars and TLC also provided them a new strategy for taking back the culture, the Quiverful movement. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth here. This video is long enough as it is, and there are many more channels and videos you could watch in order to understand this movement better. Amazon has an amazing 4-part series on all this called Shiny Happy People. But to sum it up, Quiverful is a movement that entails giant families where no kids get the parental attention they need, leading to severe developmental and behavioral issues, most famously exhibited by Josh Duggar. Look him up. It's fucked up. They also have this hierarchy of power that put the father just below God, meaning a bunch of narcissists found a religion that allows them to indulge in their worst, most controlling and abusive selves, leading to untold damage and neglect done to their kids, who are mostly raising each other, and get this, being each other's homeschool teachers. To any rational person, one can see how this setup is ripe for untold horrors. Unfortunately, any rational person also understands that religious institutions tend to cover up abuse more than dealing with it ethically or even legally. And that is exactly what God's Not Dead, We the People is enforcing. This entire culture. The sad irony of all this is that while they may feel that they are making Christianity stronger, it comes at the expense of their own people, especially their children.
So nobody ever wants to be categorized as a wimpy girl, right? Like, oh, look at her, wimpiest girl on the planet. Like, no. God values Christians who are strong. He wants us to be strong girls that honor him. Because our minds, no one can see into them. You could have these thoughts coming into your mind and no one will ever know. I'm a wimpy girl and I allow sinful thoughts, things that are not pleasing to God, to stay in my mind as we have unresolved sin in our past that we haven't dealt with. Yeah. And that sin lingers. And the devil gets a foothold in our lives. It doesn't help that our culture is telling us, follow your heart, listen to your feelings, do what feels right. Yeah. Jeremiah 17:9 tells us, the heart is deceitful above all else. But in our culture and in our sinful hearts, we want to rely on ourselves. We want to do it all ourselves. Yeah. Instead of being wimpy girls and saying, I've got this, we need to say, no, I don't have this.
Yeah. How to get a girl to like you. Compliment them. Don't tell them they're hot.
Should Christians wear yoga pants? Is it hot in here? Obviously extremely controversial because so many Christians wear yoga pants. Oh, yes. My wife, she was in yoga pants pants, man?
I'm wearing leggings.
Okay, leggings, yoga pants though, same category of clothing. It should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Should I wear this extremely tight outfit that's gonna show off my curves and make me look super good when I go out? Is my inner beauty, is my love for people, is my servant's heart, are these things that God obviously counts as more important than your outer beauty really shining through?
Also, loose is in these days.
Yeah, well, that makes it easy for us.
And today I'm going to be talking about praying for your future husband. Like, wow, this is a way that I can actually start serving my future husband even before I know him. Since I was 13 until now, and hopefully into the future, I have been praying for my future husband. So here's my list of qualities and prayers that I'm praying for my future husband. Number one is that he would not have a love for the world. Strong girls obey God's word even when it's hard. The truth is, the Christian life is exactly like running a really hard marathon. When you get out in the world and people disagree with you, when people don't want to be your friend on Facebook because of your Christian beliefs, when people don't like you because you're being a Christian or they challenge you, that is when it gets really, really tough. And sadly, a lot of Christian girls cave in and they become wimpy girls when they get out in the culture and the going gets tough. It takes a strong girl to go against her emotions and to obey God's word anyways.
Being a wife comes with a lot of controversy because the Bible teaches that the wife is to submit to her husband. She is to let him lead and support him in his dreams and his passion. What I'm learning is that a wife's duty is to serve God by loving and supporting her husband even when he messes up.
By me knowing that she is supporting me and she's gonna have my back even if I might mess up, that gives me so much more peace and freedom.
So women who are married or hoping to be married, one, don't follow the way of the world. It's wrong. It's
Let me comment
selfish.
on that. Man, before marriage, I thought I was close to the Lord. I thought my Christian faith was strong. I thought that I was pretty mature, and a year into marriage almost, and I was sitting there feeling like, dang, this is hard.
Like, you think you're ready for marriage, and then you get married, you're like, huh? Guys, you see us in our videos. We have fun together.
There have been times when I've done something or said something to Morgan that's been so hurtful, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's nice knowing that she can't go anywhere.
Okay, that doesn't give you the right to say mean things
I
to your
feel
wife.
guilty about it.
You don't wake up every morning. Oh, kissy, kissy, no. Okay?
I wish we did.
And you don't fall asleep all, God love you, no.
I wish we did. I'd like to go to bed snuggling.
We do. Okay, no, we're not putting this in the video.
We need to work on this. We got in a fight and had to stop recording. And literally, like, that was yesterday. All last night was really rough.
And that just shows that Satan sucks and he hates marriages and he hates godly marriages and he does not want to see us succeed.
A quick look at not just these channels, but the channels of any Christian influencer geared toward a young adult audience will show that the majority of content is centered around sex, dating, and relationships. Of course, most influencers of this demographic will discuss these things in general, but the amount of focus and attention paid to these issues amongst Christians is borderline obsessive. And why wouldn't it be? Another thing that I remember about going to youth groups as a small town punk rock atheist was the sheer amount of discussions about sex. It was always to discuss abstinence, of course, before a religion full of people ready to call the trans community groomers for existing in public. The sheer amount of open discussion of sex to children as young as 8 that goes on in any given youth group on any given day is creepy and obsessive. And this was back in the Bush era, before Christianity lost its mind. Your average Christian child, especially the girls, will be talked to about abstinence or minding what they wear in front of boys, or be told to beware of thoughts of the opposite sex before many of them even get to first grade. And that's assuming they even go to a public school to begin with. That is grooming. If a gay person talked to their kids about sex as much as your typical youth group leader did, Christians would call for their lynching in a heartbeat. They can say it's for abstinence all they want, but to talk about abstinence, they have to talk about everything around it. And when they only talk about sex to tell their especially impressionable teenagers that they can't have it, it will create an aura of mystery around it that will make them want to know what the big deal is. This is the most ideal condition for actual groomers. This is why there are constant reports of priests and church leaders abusing minors. All of this serves to normalize the conversations of sex that allows these people to breach the topic with their victims, and that is the first step to abuse. Then you have the lucky ones who aren't vulnerable enough to be groomed, but who are just constantly having sex waved in front of them, permanently behind this barrier of marriage. They have these hormones and the secular world right in front of them, where people are allowed to explore their sexuality at their own pace and on their own terms. Meanwhile, it's this urge that they have to constantly fight. So then these hormonal and repressed teenagers meet each other and want so badly to experience sex, this big thing that's been built up in their heads since they were young, that they get married as soon as they can just so they can finally have it. And then, because of the stigma around divorce, these kids end up stuck together forever. It's cruel to have a culture with this attitude, considering so many marriages start before either party would be trusted to get a car loan. The amount of change someone can experience between their teenage years and their mid-20s can and should be extremely dramatic and unique. Growing apart from someone you were dating when you were a teenager means you are doing it right, that you are coming into your own as a person and maturing as an individual. So to trap yourself with someone you got with long before you figured yourself out as a fully developed adult is a recipe for misery. I'm a romantic. Some people truly do meet their soulmates as teenagers, and they grow together in love and in sync. That exists, and that is awesome. But it's one thing for that to happen organically. It's another thing for it to be a normalized part of this culture. And it's something that is only shared with other fundamentalist, extremist religious groups. So you got a religion full of people who seem happy and perfect to the public, especially at church, but who are varying degrees of miserable in private. No relationship is perfect, of course, but any healthy marriage could end without any consequences outside the fallout between the people involved. No religion where divorce is stigmatized or banned has healthy marriages. For a lot of these people, marriage is essentially a trap, and one they trapped themselves in when they were very young and impressionable. Meanwhile, they live in a secular world where everyone around them just gets to do whatever and whoever they want. I mean, if you haven't been allowed to grow up since you were 17, wouldn't you be a little resentful too? Wouldn't you want to fight against the rights of people who live with a freedom you will never know? Wouldn't you be so confused and conflicted over, say, yoga pants? That you would just really prefer it if women stopped wearing them, even if they wanted to? Wouldn't you be so resentful of your choice to marry young? And wouldn't you just project it onto people who live in defiance of the strict gender roles that got you in that situation? The modern wave of religious extremism is made up of miserable, repressed, angry people who want everyone to be as miserable as they are, and so shove their beliefs down everyone's throats. Despite being so obviously angry and miserable, you don't see people satirizing Buddhists or Sikhs or juggalos.
There we go.
Because they are kind, good people who, yes, have their strong beliefs, but leave everyone else alone. Hashtag Juggalo for President 2024. So if Christians are wondering why they are so often criticized and satirized, it's not just because of their beliefs. It's because they keep trying to force those beliefs on a society that is only growing more secular with every coming year.
So I have a deal for you, Christian fundamentalists. You keep your beliefs to yourselves, and we'll take back Lizzo.
Yes. That's the winner. That is the winner.
4. Aronofsky's Midrash.
As dramatic and extreme as the Christian response was to Noah, Darren Aronofsky's reaction was just as, if not more, dramatic than that. His films have never been very subtle, but even for Aronofsky, the fact that his follow-up to Noah, a film that was outright rejected by the fundamentalist Christian audiences, uses the Bible as a framework for his most obvious, blunt, and over-the-top film yet, is a little on the nose.
I had one very publicized fight with a studio over the final cut of Noah, and there were a lot of pressures coming from not just commercial ends, but personal religious beliefs as well. And that was a rough journey to get through. So ultimately, I ended up getting the film I wanted to make.
How do you handle the critiques? Do they hurt?
I don't fully allow myself in front of them, but in today's world, because of just how connected everyone is, you can't sort of escape information coming from different places and bombarding you. So I have a sense of what's going on. It doesn't upset me, it excites me. I've always been jealous of songwriters who, in a day or in a week can write a song and get put an emotion out, sometimes in a few hours. As filmmakers, at a minimum, it's a 2-3 year process to get a story out and told. A lot of our projects have been 10, 15 years, and it was very early in my career, but I started to think about Noah. I guess 14, 15 years of filmmaking to get to this point. So that was floating in the back of my mind.
This poured out of you in an insanely short period of time, right? Yeah. Basically 5 days, it just kind of like...
It was a fever dream. I thought about Genesis, I thought about Revelations, I thought about all these things, and it sort of gave me all these ideas for structuring it, and that allowed me kind of unleash that mythology and that mythological structure onto this allegory, and it all kind of made sense, and then these 5 days, it just poured out. I think it came out of just a lot of rage and frustration with what was going on. It kind of works on two levels. There's a story of a husband and wife dealing with a home invasion, and there's also the story of Mother Earth dealing with people who weren't invited. I wanted to make a film about Mother Nature. I wanted to make a film from her perspective. I mean, we're working on an allegorical level where it's dealing with, these big symbols.
It's also what Darren is saying, it's much bigger. We're taking, allegories and metaphors that are universal and also biblical.
J-Law actually has a man. The topic is J-Law's almost 1-year relationship with her director boyfriend, Darren Aronofsky. The couple started dating after filming wrapped on their movie Mother. The Harvard grad does not get J-Law's obsession with reality TV. She laughs. He just finds it so vastly disappointing.
We're not quite sure what the relationship is, who you represent when we begin watching the film, and then things begin to reveal. But at what point do you let us know that?
I think Ed's a good one to answer that, which is...
It was a trip, man. I don't know. I find it an extraordinary experience watching this thing. I'm still not quite sure what to think of it, I take my hat off to these two for persevering. I mean, Michelle and I were lucky enough to get out of there halfway through. Anyway, I don't know what else to say. Javier, take it away, buddy.
Basically, I didn't know what I was doing, and
This is not going well.
No, it's not. Basically, he decided in the editing room how my character is gonna be, and always following his direction, because he was the one who knew what this movie was about. And I knew as well.
They're talking about how this movie, they're saying, this movie, you hear critics talking about this movie will challenge you. This movie will make you think, make you ponder. And it's like, nah, this movie is going to do a lot of things to piss you off because the movie does a lot of fucked up things in it. The movie just, as it goes on and on, there are scenes in there where it's not going to make you think. You're going to be like, wow, this really ruined my day, and why did I watch this?
Is that different than any other Darren Aronofsky movie?
Before seeing this movie, I avoided anything like specific about what it was about, but I had heard that it's very, very over the top and extreme and obvious. And I was like, oh, so it's a Darren Aronofsky movie.
This movie is insane. Aronofsky has crafted a film that will keep people talking for years.
What did I say? A grotesque, black, very jet black, ghastly comedy, which is an allegory and a parable.
It plays out in such an absurdist way that it's almost like a really dark Dr. Seuss book.
They're kind of marketing this as a horror movie, and I think it's really more of a very dark comedy.
There's people who cry, there's people who scream, and there's people that laugh hysterically.
As a sensory experience,
Yeah.
as a film that is unlike anything else out there. From that perspective, you should see it, but I don't know that it is that profound as he wants it to be.
It's not super deep. This is not Darren Aronofsky, the director of The Wrestler. This is from Darren Aronofsky, the director of The Fountain and Noah.
There are so many different ways to interpret this movie that I hesitate to say there is one specific way to pinpoint what Aronofsky is going for, which I really respect.
I don't understand how a lot of people are saying, but I didn't get it, or I didn't see these things, or I think that this might be what it is. It's not. I mean, it's right there for people.
The myths of the Bible would be a really good kind of structure. So I went back to Genesis, which I had been studying a little bit on the last film. And if you go through the film, you'll actually see all of the stories unfold in order in the Bible.
She is trying to turn this this home into the idyllic setting for them, an Eden-like setting, very, very crucially.
I feel like he's trying to say that Bardem is God and that Lawrence is Mother Earth.
Thank you. And then Michelle shows up and and then the brothers show up and they're
the Cain and Abel.
Got an absolute Cain and Abel.
And then the sync breaks and it's Thank you.
The way fame can have an impact on you and the ones you care about if you let it.
Okay, he's a poet, and this is as if someone who dated an artist like this angrily wrote a poem.
I didn't see it as a metaphor for fame. I saw it as more of a metaphor for how insatiable we all are.
For me, it was more about worship, but then it came, and then I think when you cast Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, Michelle Pfeiffer, Ed Harris, all people that deal with celebrity culture, people started to sort of make those connections that we were somehow making a statement about that. It's about a married couple who have been happy at once, but things are starting to sort of change, and it's just at that point when the characters are starting to become aware that something off. I don't know if Javier Bardem's character is fully aware of what's going on, but definitely Jennifer Lawrence's character has more of a sense that there's something starting to strain in the relationship. It's, a nightmare version of a breakup, which is really interesting for people.
By chance, I was reading Jane Eyre, and then I read The Wide Sargasso Sea. So, these Victorian patriarchal novels show these loving, amazing husbands that are very slowly and delicately taking away their wives' dignity. Before we even knew what feminism was, people were writing these novels that were showing women's strength being drained away from them.
But I think we definitely went really, really intense.
Too far.
We went
too far.
Well, we always go a little too far sometimes.
Question is for Jennifer, which was the most difficult scene to film for you?
I woke up to a surprise and ran down the stairs. That was the worst feeling I've ever had in my life. That was awful. And I don't know if I would do a movie that made me feel that way ever again. I did it. I'm done.
Someone said to me after they saw it, and that's all they said was like, only you could have made this. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. I don't know if they liked it or what, but it was cool.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like to play all of our mother, Jennifer? That's a big role.
It was painful. It was...
Jennifer Lawrence and her boyfriend Darren Aronofsky have split. Our sources say the breakup happened in October and was amicable. The pair remain friends.
He was writing the story of their origin and the initial love and the initial creation that they had together. That's kind of what I reasoned myself on, what I talked to the actors about when we were out in that field getting stung by mosquitoes, why we were doing it.
Great.
When Requiem for a Dream went to Blu-ray, I saw the film. I could remember every moment of making it, but I knew it wasn't me anymore. And so you just sort of move through these things, you change, but ultimately there are reflections that come back to haunt.
All right, let's go to you. Questions,
Please.
comments for Darren Aronofsky. If you got a question,
After
please.
5 years of working on 2 divisive revisionist biblical films, Aronofsky had his fill. In 2022, he came back with a new film. This time, an adaptation of Samuel D. Hunter's stage play, The Whale. The film centers around Charlie, a morbidly obese gay man living in the Midwest, as he eats his way through his last few remaining days. The film uses Moby Dick as a metaphor for both the themes of resentment, redemption, and self-destruction, and the character dynamic of Charlie and his daughter. Despite the shift in source material, fundamentalist Christians were still on Aronofsky's mind. The inciting incident for Charlie's depression was the death of his partner as a result of being the gay son of a fundamentalist Christian preacher. Then there's the character of Elder Thomas, a Mormon missionary who comes to Charlie's aid. He is a seemingly nice guy, doing his best to help Charlie and instill some hope and optimism that may keep him from slipping further into despair. Ultimately, the film shows that, like with most real-life fundamentalists, when push comes to shove, their kindness proves to be conditional, as they view people who don't share in their beliefs as beneath them. After the grand vision he brought to Noah, and the vulnerable, id-driven rage he expressed in Mother, the simple portrayal of Elder as a dishonest wolf in sheep's clothing is the most damning statement against fundamentalism in his entire career. An interesting detail about Elder is that he is a runaway. He found the teachings of the church he grew up in to be outdated and hopes to spread his own brand of Mormonism that better serves the world as it is. All this is contrasted against Elder's naivety and ignorance of the plight of others. Modern Christian culture is desperately holding on to any relevance it has in an increasingly secular world. The best way they could do this is to attach themselves to the conservative movement, who are also losing relevancy in a more diverse and open society. By joining forces, they hope that they can influence politics and society to be more like them. That is despite showing themselves to be part of a miserable and dysfunctional organization that facilitates and hides horrific and widespread sexual abuse within their own ranks, that enables narcissistic patriarchal behavior and treats their women as secondary citizens, whose children are so behind in their attitudes and behaviors that they are stuck in a state of arrested development. Christianity, generally speaking, sees the secular world as of the devil. Most Christians, and I cannot stress this enough, the vast majority of Christians do not take this literally, but many devout extremists do, and so they want to see the secular world destroyed. And to them, it is not enough to just separate. They hope to replace the secular culture with their own. And if movies are reflections of the people that make them and the culture they are a part of, we need only look at the films they make to understand their vision for an ideal world. And that world is straight up trash, as even most Christians don't watch Christian movies. Films like Mother, The Whale, or Noah, divisive and flawed as they may be, are movies that are made with a lot of passion and talent. They are movies that inspire discussion and debate. That is what great art does. It makes you think. It makes you talk. It makes you feel. And even if you hate a movie, wouldn't you rather have movies you hate than movies so inoffensive and simplistic they make you feel nothing? Because if Christians and conservatives have their way, those are the kinds of things we stand to lose.
Thanks for watching. This essay took a lot of work, so if you made it this far, A, thanks for the view, and B, I'm hoping you liked it. If you enjoyed the content you've seen here and want to see more, hit like and subscribe. The next essay is going to be about funny people and its weirdly personal production. Lastly, say hi in the comments. Tell us what you thought of the video. I'm Lindsay. That was Eduardo. This is Pop Counterculture. Thanks for watching.